Getting your hand into an overhead position often can be a daunting task if you've had like a lot of shoulder pain for a period of time, you've had surgery, or it's just something that you've never really done a lot of. Often it's one of those movements that everyone always has shoulder pain. It's just the variance of how much shoulder pain you get. And there's a really logical reason as to why we get such limited movement overhead. So I want to put together a quick video to show you guys like how to actually access better overhead range of movement. It's not as hard as you would think, but I think there's often just a couple of big steps that are missed that limit your ability to get into these overhead positions. Now, just a little bit of context. I've had a shoulder reco, and there was periods of time there where I didn't even access overhead positions just because, of pain, discomfort, and limited range. And that kind of led me down a bit of a pathway where I was like, how do I actually solve this? There's got to be a better reason. There was no amount of mobility drills were fixing the problem. No amount of scap-based drills were fixing the problem. And it was just because I was missing the component of the rib. I was missing the component of the diaphragm itself. So I'm going to run you through a way to actually access better range of movement through your lat, but in a way that your body can actually use it and implement it, and then how we train it so that you can maintain that and use it into your training. With anything training, there's always going to be a trade-off. If we're doing 1,000 reps on something, we're building tension, we're building stiffness. So somewhere during your ecosystem, if you're training weak and block, you need to offset some of that tightness. So these drills here are actually really good to use at the start of your training program, but they can be used in any context, whether you've had a flare-up of shoulder pain, whether you're just doing some movement work on an off training day, it doesn't really matter. The concept remains that it needs to be in your training program at some point during your week, because there's often this misconception where people think, oh, I get stronger, I get better at movements. Surely that means I have to do less prehab and mobility work. But the reality is it's the opposite. The better you get, the more you need to put into actually doing increased range of movement, making sure you have access to full range of movement so that you can continue to do these exercises time and time again. Because at the end of the day, training is stress, so we need to have enough available range to actually use it. Now, often when you think of the lats, right, we just think about getting overhead, but the lats run from here all the way down the back onto the opposite side. So what happens as a result of training over time, we're constantly in these extension-based positions. So if we have a look at this position side on here, I'm in a position where my lats become locked down. Now, the thing is, the positions that we're in, where our joints are, our muscle's just gonna respond to that. So it's gonna tighten up as a result of my bones being in this position. So what we need to do is when we're starting to think of getting into an overhead position, we also need to think about how we can get the joints and the bones in the right position so that we can get some length through the actual tissues itself. And that's where we're gonna start off. Now I'm gonna run you through 2 breathing drills. Now, breathing drills probably cop a bit of flack in the industry, but honestly, once you've used them and you've implemented them into your training, you understand why they're so effective. Now, these aren't the be-all end-all, but they're simply getting your nervous system in a position where it feels safe and secure to let go some of that tension. And then on top of that, we can then extend the range of movement and actually train it. So the first drill I'm gonna run you through is what I call a quadruped push. So if we get on all fours and we think about pushing the floor away, now, what we want to do here is round our upper back out as much as possible, tuck the pelvis under and push the floor away. Now, what this is doing is when we're stuck in these extension-based positions, it's taking us into the opposite position. It's bringing our rib cage down, it's getting our abs on, and it's allowing for better expansion through our diaphragm itself, and we get all that stability through our midsection. Perfect, because what that does is it takes us out of these extension-based postures. And then by default, we're getting more stability, but we're actually starting to get a little bit more length through the actual lat itself, which is the first step of your lat actually being able to be stretched properly. So if you come here, what I want you to do is inhale 5 to 8 seconds, and then exhale. And on the exhale, push your rib cage down, tuck your hips under, and push the floor away. Now, you would do anywhere from 5 to 10 breaths. But just remember, it's not forceful. You're drawing air in, and on the exhale, yes, you're tightening up your position, but it's not a short, hard, and fast breath. Big controlled breaths, because we're trying to get your parasympathetic nervous system involved in this. So then, once you've started to get a little bit of range, you get a little bit of expansion through your ribs, what that means is some of that tissue tension is going to drop off. So if you get down onto this position here, Now, for a lot of people, you can do it in two different positions, but if you just go into this position here, for a lot of people, even myself, I'm getting a stretch there already. So what we want to do is take ourselves into a slightly overhead position, breathe again as we were, breathe in between the shoulder blades, and on the exhale, just let your arms go and reach out a little bit. So from here, and then a big exhale. Now what you'll see there, you'll actually start to see the back trying to expand there. But what ends up happening is you actually get some length through the lats as well because we're fully rounding out through the back and the lower back. So by default, we're lengthening the lats. Now, a big problem is we struggle to breathe and we breathe too hard and too fast. So you've got to slow it down, be very intentional. And as anything, like if you train something over and over again, you're going to get better at breathing and you're going to get better at expanding. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to start to expose the lat into an overhead position with some mobility. So I love the banded lat stretch. Now, something to note on this is we also want to do it from that position, that stable position. A lot of the time when people do it, they default to these extension-based postures. And even though you feel like you're getting a stretch, your body doesn't fully accept it, okay? So what we want to do is even here, pushing the ribs down, inhaling, exhaling, and letting that arm drift up overhead. Now, you can play around with different positions here, standing, kneeling, but the ethos remains the same, that you need a lot of tension from the band, dragging our arm up overhead, but you want to do it from a stacked position, okay? That's key here. All right, the next thing is starting to load that overhead position with an eccentric focus. So a dumbbell pullover is great, but I like to use 2 dumbbells. Now, this is the start point. So keeping some tension in your lats at all times, getting a bit of extension through the ribs. So you're actually starting to get a stretch at the end range. Now, it's less about the contraction at this point and more about the stretch. You can see each rep, you can get a little bit further in terms of range. And you'll also get, by default, some thoracic extension, which is a perfect coupling to get into an overhead position. Now, the thing is, when you unlock mobility, you actually need to get accustomed with the positions that you've unlocked. You need to get good at knowing where you are in space. So when you take your arm up overhead, we actually need the scap to move as well. So as you lift your arm up overhead, it rotates up and then tilts backwards. So we're going to prep the scapulas with a Y raise, and then we need to start to actually use this in motion. So the first drill that I really like, and again, there's a ton of variants here, but a small plate, you don't go heavy with these, and then reaching and lifting your arms up for a period of time. Now, if you have pain or you want to just work one side at a time, just do a unilateral one. Now, the good thing about this is you've got the feedback from the ground, so you can keep your ribs stacked down, and you can really focus on the actual scap positioning. Now, with these drills, don't be worried about reps. Be worried about the end range, how it feels, and the muscle contractions that you can actually get in these positions. Far better than just mincing through sets and reps. Now, the next thing that we want to do is actually start to load the overhead position. For a lot of people, like barbell pressing movements overhead or even dumbbells can be quite problematic in terms of pain. So a landmine press is a great variation that will allow you to actually load your arm into an overhead position. It's not as aggressive, it doesn't take it fully overhead, but what it does do is allow you to start to really get some good pressing movements going, and in a way that you can focus on your shoulder position and your scap position together. Now, something that I always talk about is you can't out-cue bad positioning. So in the upper body, this is so relevant. You've got your arm moving, you've got your rib cage, and you actually have your shoulder blades. So we need to coordinate these things to all work together, okay? So what often happens is we get stuck in these postures. In most cases, it's these extended back postures. Then as a mechanism of just control, your body will then elevate the shoulders and roll the shoulder blades slightly forward, right? Then, because the bones are there, the tissues and the structures around it get really, really tight. At the front of the shoulder, the pec minor, everything at the front. The lat then just shortens down because it thinks it needs to control it. So what we need to do is expose it to the opposite. So we're using these breathing drills to get some reset, to get your nervous system down regulated, then progressively decrease some of the tension that we've developed and then expose it to range over time. And the goal for everyone is actually to train. We want to be in the gym, we want to be building muscle, we want to be building strength. That's 100% given, but often the problem is that we're locked in positions that aren't conducive to long-term progress. So if you work on getting into better positions first, rather than just mincing through sets and reps or being married to an exercise, you're gonna get so much more out of your training, specifically so much more out of your overhead movements.